Inshallah. Bismillah.
Yeah, Drexel is right here, considered part of this area.
Yeah, it's only like
Drexel and the University of Penn, they come to try to take up the land around this place.
yeah,
Expanding their university.
everything.
The third temple. I used to work for temple.
All right. I think we are live. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. On this snowy day, we are in Philadelphia together with Sanaya Parker, CAIR-Philadelphia's community organizer, and our esteemed guest. Although we are a guest at his institution right now, is dear brother Abdurrahim Mohammed, one of the pillars of the Philadelphia Muslim community, a community historian, someone who has dedicated his life to document the experiences of our communities. This is the first event in a series of webinars and events that we are going to host throughout February in these to observe the African American History Month. And at CAIR-Philadelphia, we thought what best way would be to uplift the stories of our institutions, of our masajid, of our festivals in this month, especially coming on the heels of a very vibrant and critical conversation we have had all year around racism, social justice, around racism within our own communities. So we are hoping that these series will help on multiple fronts, and inshallah we are ready to go ahead. Thank you so much, Abdurrahim Mohammed, for hosting us, for opening New Africa Center, ICPIC, to us. We are blessed to be with you, and we wanted to start off our program with a set of questions about you. We are curious about you. So if you could please let us walk through your own personal story. How did you start ICPIC, New Africa Center? How did the idea of the Islamic Heritage Festival came up? Give us a little bit of information about that. And next, we are going to, of course, walk you through the very rich collections here, as you can see behind us and in the other walls that we will walk you through. There are images that are from the turning points of both American Muslim history and Philadelphia Muslim history. So, but without further ado, thank you again, Seth, and let's hear a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. I am really excited about this opportunity to introduce a new audience to our New Africa Center. And we've been here for a while. We're one of the best kept secrets in the city of Philadelphia. We started our New Africa Center in the year 2005. And we chose this area primarily because this area has such a rich cultural history of Islam here in Philadelphia, and right across the street at 4218 Lancaster Avenue is where Muhammad's Temple number 12 used to be in the late 50s and early 60s. And I used to go there as a boy, and Malcolm X used to come there as a minister, and Imam Worthy Muhammad, his father, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, had sent him to Philadelphia to be the minister. And my father was a minister, Abdul Malik Muhammad. he was a minister, so they all were associates and brothers. And so, knowing that that site was where Muhammad's temple number 12 used to be, we registered with the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission to have a historical marker, Pennsylvania historical marker installed there because of its rich history, and it was approved. And then because down the street from there at 40th and Lancaster, we have a historical marker of Dr. Martin Luther King, a mural, marker and a mural representing his Freedom Now speech that he gave here on Lancaster Avenue in 1965.
Mhm.
And then associates of mine in our community meetings, we were all talking about rebranding the area. And the idea of the new Freedom District came out of these meetings. So we rebranded the area as the new Freedom District.
Mhm.
Um,
And for those who may not be from this area, we are talking a few blocks from Drexel, where Sanai is a student, UPenn. So it's a vibrant area of the city.
Yeah, well, the area is West Philadelphia. It's in West Philly, in Philadelphia, PA. We rebrand the area, like I said, as the new Freedom District, but in the African American community, or what one called the Black community, we used to call this section of the area the Black Belt. I grew up, it was called the Black Belt.
Mhm.
We took this position of rebranding and renaming the area as the new Freedom District because personally, I have over 100-year history of my family living in this community.
Mhm.
My grandparents and great-grandparents moved up from the Jim Crow South in Putnam, Georgia,
Mhm.
and they moved right here to West Philly. And they've lived in West Philly all their lives for several generations.
Mhm.
And we have our business right here on Lancaster Avenue. My mother, 90 years old, still live around the corner in the house that she grew up with her grandmother. With my, so nobody has more of a right than I do to rebrand this neighborhood as the new Freedom District simply because we're residents of the area and we take seriously our citizenship, and with our citizenship come ownership. So we own this community and we take the responsibility for this community. So we rebranded as the new Freedom District to inspire the youth and people in the community to take a new sense of pride in their community and pride in place. And with all this talk about systemic racism and the inferiority complex disorder that African Americans suffer from, we know the whole idea of a new Freedom District and highlighting and celebrating that rich cultural legacy could do a whole lot of good to help uplift the mind and spirit of the people in this community, right? That's medicinal, just like when we came out in the early Nation of Islam back in the 50s and 60s, people called the Nation of Islam a bunch of hate preachers and so-called black nationalists and un-Islamic and un-American.
Mhm.
But I've lived long enough to see this Black Lives Matter movement taking place. And I say, googa mooga. These people are using our language. Freedom, justice, and equality. We called the white man the devil. That was because back in the 30s and 40s, people understood what that meant. And we were predominantly a Christian community. So the teachers of the early Nation of Islam was reaching out to our community, which was Christian, and they came from a Christian worldview in order to reach that audience, right? Then one thing that really has to be clearly understood when people talk about the evolution of the early African-American Muslim community, they have to understand, first of all, what the original name of the early Nation of Islam was called. It's called the Lost Found Nation of Islam in the Wilderness of North America. That is such a definitive definition to give clarity to what this movement was all about.
Mhm.
It was about a lost found group of people that was being reintroduced to Islam here in the wilderness of North America. And the message was for a black man. And so that message resonated within our community and raised the African American community up to a new sense of self-pride and dignity, where Eric C. Lincoln wrote a book about us and called us Black Muslims, right? And so the label stopped. And so people just started identifying us as Black Muslims, right? But as our community evolved, we had such an impact on the overall African American community and the international community to give people a whole new sense of self-pride and dignity. African Americans as a whole were still calling themselves colored, calling themselves Negroes, but in our newspaper, Muhammad Speaks newspaper, we said the so-called Negro, because we weren't Negroes. And so that message resonated within our community till finally Black people start putting down the name Negro and color and start identifying themselves as Black people, right? James Brown even said it was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that inspired him to write that record, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, right? So all of these factors are so important in understanding the evolution and the growth of Islam in the African American community.
Mhm.
And if you don't understand that and conceptualize the struggle and the oppression that our people have been through, and how we see Islam as a vehicle of philosophy and ideology to unify people and to raise us up,
Mhm.
right?
Indeed.
And if you don't have that kind of spirit in the Islam that you practice in the day, then you're missing something that's very, very significant that our community had. And we were sincere. We were dedicated. And we were committed. And if the new generation today can get a portion of that commitment and that spirit, then we can go a long way to really not only be living a good, clean, morally upright life, but make a real impact to uplift our community. Because that's what we were all about. Community building, that's what they call it nowadays. Community building, community development. Back in the day, we called it Black nationalism. That only meant having control of the economics in your neighborhood, the politics in your neighborhood, the education, right? All those facets of community life. To us, that was Black nationalism. It wasn't this academic term and academic idea that meant something different.
Mhm.
To the common person, we looked at Black nationalism as a form of unity and as a way for Black people to have control and control of their community. Nowadays, that's called community development.
Mhm.
So we're in the community development business nowadays.
With this, may I ask two questions, Rahim? You talked about generations, and you mentioned your father, who you said was a minister in Philadelphia. Is it correct?
Yes.
Was he with Temple 12A, B, C? Which ones? From which years? What do you remember? Maybe as a child, as a young man, with your father being the minister, what was life like in that process? And of course, a second question in terms of generations, and we will start looking at maybe the walls and some of the history as well shortly. But how would you then, as Imam Waliduddin Muhammad, as someone who served here in Philadelphia and later in 75 moved the nation of Islam in a different direction, how would you read his legacy and what led him to do the change that he has led over the years? But first, let's talk a little bit about your family and your father, your memories from that time, and of course, let us also know about ICPIC, the Islamic Cultural Preservation and Information Council.
Okay. Well, to start with, myself personally, I was born right down here in West Philly, down in the Black Bottom, right? I was born down here. I went to school down here. I went to elementary school. I went to Belmont, that's around the corner. I went to Blankenburg, that's around the corner. I went to Southburger. I went to Overbrook. I went to Shoemaker. Right? So I've been in West Philly all my life. Right? My parents and my grandparents and uncles and aunts all joined the Nation of Islam in the 50s. Malcolm X, he was a powerful minister, and he came here teaching, and my dad and my mom and, like I said, family members coming hearing him speak was excited by his message, and they joined the Nation of Islam. My father's father was a Moor. He was a Moor. He was a follower of Noble Drew Ali.
Mm-hmm.
And Noble Drew Ali founded the Moorish Science Temple that came before the early Nation of Islam. And their underlying message was the same kind of message of the Nation of Islam.
So your grandfather joined the Moorish Science Temple around 1920s, late
Right.
20s.
See, my grandfather joined the Moorish Science Temple, and he was an active member of that.
Mm-hmm.
My father was taught about Islam from his father through the Moorish Science Temple's ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So when he heard Malcolm and the Nation of Islam was, gaining popularity, he was encouraged to join, and he did. And so they were from this area. See, Temple number 12, they didn't have no bunch of satellites. They didn't have a bunch of satellites. They didn't have 12A, B, C, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just 12. When they had, my dad and my family members were going to the temple. My dad became a minister. He helped establish the Kingdom Temple. It's temple number 20.
Mm.
And then he established the temple in Coatesville. So those spots now are masjids.
Mm-hmm.
But he founded those in his work as a doing his dawah work.
Mm-hmm.
Back then we called it soldiering,
Mm-hmm.
right? We sold the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, and we were educated and trained on how to talk with our people and invite them to the temples and all that. So selling the papers was excellent way for you to engage the community.
Mm-hmm.
And then back then you couldn't come to the temple without somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's how we were able to fish.
Mm-hmm.
We called it fishing, bringing in new converts. All right. So it was an exciting time, particularly for young men in their late teens, early 20s. It gave us all a real strong sense of unity and sense of purpose and a strong sense of pride,
Mm-hmm.
and we work to help clean up our communities. Then in 1975, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed away, and his son, Imam Worthy Muhammad, became the new leader, we just followed suit to follow the new leader.
Not to interrupt you, but you should remember, you probably have that memories of when Imam Walid Muhammad served in Philadelphia as a minister, correct?
While he was here, as a minister in the Nation of Islam?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, well, when the man was a minister here in Philadelphia,
How old were you at that time?
well, early 60s, I was what? You want me to tell my age? I don't know, I gotta think about it. Let me see, how old was I? I guess I was 9 years old,
Mm-hmm.
right? See, when the ministers were here, my dad was working with them. I mean, they weren't nothing but brothers to me. That was Brother Minister Malcolm, and that was Brother Minister Wallace,
Mhm.
right? They weren't no famous guys,
Mhm.
right? So we didn't look at it like it was, we were entertaining any real celebrities. I mean, you were honored to have the ministers come to your house,
Mhm.
and to have opportunity to be in their company from time to time, but it wasn't like I said, you being in the company of some celebrity and then you feeling so, I guess, super special,
Mhm.
right? But Imam Muhammad was very, very, since he was over the temple, he wasn't as rigid as like a lot of the imam or minister used to be. So he was more relaxed. We used to watch movies.
Mhm.
One thing about Imam Muhammad, he was introducing Quran and introducing Arabic, right?
Mhm.
So I do recall vividly learning Al-Fatiha in Arabic, and my dad and mom, they had prayer rugs, they made salat, right? But that wasn't something that people did all over the nation.
Mhm.
Right here in the city where the man was the minister, they did that. But they did it in such a way that he knew not to sort of like cause no real major conflict about the position of his day.
Mhm.
But he did introduce the people to the Quran and introduce people to make it Salat and the Arabic. I never forget. I knew how to read. I knew how to recite
Mhm.
the Al-Fatiha, and for some reason or other, my neighbors, older sisters, and other people, they knew that I could recite Al-Fatiha in Arabic, and they used to like to hear me reciting it,
Mhm.
right? And I guess that was something different. I didn't think of it as anything so unique. I know our faith tradition was different than most other people, and we were more closely adhered to like the Jehovah's Witnesses,
Mhm.
right? And so we didn't celebrate Christmas and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't impact me too much. Like I'm thinking I was missing something per se.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so that's basically kind of like how my childhood was, and
Do you
my company with these
Yeah.
men.
do you remember, for example, 65, the assassination, the Shahada of Malcolm? Was it a big news in your life at the time? Um, and then, of course, let's talk a little bit about Imam Walid ibn Muhammad and 75. Where were you in your life at that moment? Now you're an adult, not a child, and then what do you remember from that time?
Yeah, see, in '65, I was still like, I was just like coming into teenage life. So 12, 13 years old, you're not really that conscientious of world affairs like that.
Sir.
So I wasn't like all that conscientious about politics I mean, I can remember real clearly President Kennedy getting shot, right? But any other real major events, I mean, I do recall we used to go to the Arena Theater, the Arena. It's at 46th and Market. Today, that's called the Enterprise Center. But it used to be called the Arena. And it was like a public hall where roller skating was done and people had big public meetings. Well, we rented the arena several times to have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad come and speak, right? And thousands of people would come and hear him speak. That was around the same period where state representatives from the area came to hear the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he spoke very favorable of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his work. And people were surprised that this politician took that kind of position because so many people viewed him as the bad guy, right? So that was kind of like that period. Then the period of when the Imam became the new leader in 1975 after Elijah Muhammad passed, that was really challenging because we had already been sort of like orientated to this sense of the white man's world was going to come to an end, and when the Imam came in, he began to institute changes. And at first, a lot of people was confused about what is he doing, right? Some people felt like he was abandoning his father because he put his father in the proper perspective for us to view. He said his father wasn't a messenger giving divine revelation like messengers of God do, but that his father was a great social reformer, and we should see him in light of that. And that Farad wasn't God in the person, and that as Muslims, we don't be looking for no God becoming a no person. So he kind of straightened up the theology area, but then he never did abandon the idea of African Americans pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. He knew the importance of identity and how we as African Americans did suffer from an identity crisis. Imam Muhammad, when he first was teaching, you would think you were in you going to psychology classes. I mean, he was just, he first started teaching, he said, man means mind. That was his first thing he started teaching. Man means mind. And woman means womb of mind. And that words make people. Right? Then he said, I'll never forget, the first issue of the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, where he actually gave his first front page or center page article. The name of that article was Death to White Supremacy. That was his first public article. That's the first time I heard the term white supremacy. Then the man started teaching about the white man wasn't the devil. It wasn't a race because of his skin. It was the Caucasian grafted mentality, right? So then he began to teach all about how this grafted mentality, this evil materialistic mind, right, was wicked. And that mind was the devil. Right? So he taught about how we need to clean ourselves up and develop ourselves on the different levels of development, well, physical development, moral development, and spiritual development, right? And then he talked about the need for us to pull ourselves up and made a great focus on community development, community life. Everything was community. And it took me a while to really comprehend it. But then it finally dawned on me. I was like, community, what is it? And citizenship, he constantly emphasized that. And then it really hit me like, I don't know, you want to talk about revelation? I got a revelation. It was like citizenship. He said you have to, your citizenship is one of your most valued assets. And then we have to understand what citizenship entails. And he said, then once you comprehend and understand what citizenship is, he said, citizenship gives you ownership. Because now you see yourself as part of this entire society. And you're an active member of the society. So with citizenship comes ownership, and with ownership comes responsibility, right? So the Imam was advocating for us to be active citizens, take a new spirit with this idea of new patriotism, right? To move in our communities and rebuild our neighborhoods, right? We already had the foundation with the Nation of Islam from his dad. We may have been somewhat off course in terms of theology, but we certainly understood and had the spirit for community development. And so we continually moved forward. And as a community, we're still forging ahead. But we're not doing it on a collective basis, like an organization. Because Imam Waqti Muhammad wasn't a big fan of structured organizations. He felt that those structured organizations are tempting opportunities for those that want to take advantage and abuse people. So if you stay loose connected, where you supporting one another and all that, then you'll be less susceptible to be taken advantage of by some people that may not even really mean bad, right? So that's how I see our community evolve.
Wonderful. We have some questions coming from our audience as well. I'll pose those. Sister Hatija, I saw your question. Very quickly, if you may answer, and then Sanai has a set of questions, and we will start the walking tour of the museum as well. But Sister Hatija's question very quickly is, she asks, how many people comprised the Nation of Islam in Philadelphia when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad returned to Allah?
How many people did?
How many people were members of Nation of Islam in Philadelphia when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad returned to Allah?
I mean, I don't think nobody ever uses numbers like they could say, well, we know 100,000 people did this. In Nation of Islam, we said, for those who know, don't say, and for those who say, don't know. So in terms of actual numbers, I can't tell you what number, but what I can tell you is that the majority of the African American Muslims that were part of the Nation of Islam when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed, the majority of them all made that transition. The majority. It was not until, 2 years later in 77, 78, that Minister Louis Farrakhan broke away. And then, he restarted the Nation of Islam again.
I think 82, right? Formally.
Well, he broke away from the Imam. I think that was more like 78, 77, 78. Like 3 years later, I think became the new leader, right?
But can you give a sense of how many different temples were in the city in Philadelphia in 75? Do you have a sense of it? I thought it was from A to H.
Well, how many temple satellites we had? Is that what you asked?
So one way to look at Sister Hatija's question specifically to Philadelphia community is to try to think of how many Temple 12.
See, Philadelphia, I tell people, Philadelphia is one of the largest African American Muslim communities in the country. And the reason why it is because of the hard work and dedication of the members of the pioneers of the Nation of Islam. It wasn't because of nobody else. I don't care if there were Sunni Muslims before the Nation of Islam. You didn't even know who Sunni Muslims were. They weren't out there in the public like the Nation of Islam was, right? And I'm not saying that they weren't doing a lot of great work and teaching and learning. I'm just saying they didn't have the impact that the Nation of Islam had, right? But in terms of here in the city, like when Imam Muhammad and Malcolm was here, you just had the one temple, right? And the temple was that one place. Minister Jeremiah Shabazz, he was already members of the temple, but he used to be the captain and lieutenant and all that. And he rose up in the ranks. And Minister Jeremiah is the one that started setting up satellite temples. So satellite temples where we had like a headquarters temple, and that was considered temple 12, and you could say A, right? Then you had B, C, D, E, F, G, and we had temples all the way up to like H, right here in the city.
Mhm.
And then we had the temples in Atlantic City and Coatesville and Camden and Harrisburg. All of those temples was all a part of the satellite and under the kind of like unified with the Delaware Valley.
Mhm.
And we used to have these joint meetings and all that kind of stuff, right? So we were one thing I noticed in our community. Yes, when Imam Muhammad became the new leader, the majority of the people did go and follow him. But as he continually made changes, more and more people, I guess, got a little dissatisfied for whatever reason, or didn't fully understand what he was doing, and then they may stop coming.
Mhm.
But as time went on, the community just continued to grow. And then even those that maybe, when we say, let's say maybe 70, 78 or 79, like 2 or 3 years later, then they kind of like went out and you don't see them too much no more and all that. But as we all grew and developed, and Islam began to grow more in terms of Islam proper,
Mhm.
and then before you know it, those people were coming back again,
Mhm.
right? For when they gotten more mature, they're older, they understand the religion much more clearly, they recognize that that kind of direction was important, and so people come back. So that's what I've noticed myself.
So now I know you have a question. Let's also set the phone up for the tour of the walls as well. But if you wanna ask your set of questions quickly, and then we will maybe together with the questions, if you would like, we can take a tour. But yeah.
Well, firstly, alhamdulillah, I mean, you said so many empowering and rich things, and I've definitely just been soaking in a lot of the different stories and memories that you have about just how rich the history is here in Philadelphia. So my question was catered to that, and you had mentioned already how Philadelphia has one of the largest African-American Muslim communities in this country. So I guess my question is, looking in a broader sense, like compared to the Nation of Islam and African-American Muslims in general, nationwide, what other unique things about Philadelphia have pretty much given it its place in history for our people and our communities today, and the history leading up to today?
Yeah, well, I mean, we certainly are the numbers, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times say the people from my generation, right? The people from my generation be like, where the unity at? But see, your generation didn't experience it. So we be feeling like, in many ways, we miss the mark, or we miss passing the baton to your generation. And so a lot of people don't feel like your generation have that spirit to build our community like we did. And then I believe that they're right. But then at the same time, because I used to worry, man, what's going to happen to our community? You know? But when I see the scholarship that is coming out of our African American community, then I am very pleased, and I see that we don't have to worry, right? See, this whole idea about school of thought and ownership of this religion, see, that's the spirit I have. I own this thing. I don't let nobody from no foreign country come and tell me how to practice this religion. I remember we started our Islamic festival, right? This guy from Syria come telling me, brother, my name, if I forget what he said his name. Then he was like, you're doing this Islamic festival, and then he trying to tell me that we should not have women on the stage singing and, I don't know, congregating. I said, man, where you say you from? He said, I'm from Syria. I said, well, you go back to Syria and tell people in Syria how to practice Islam. You in America now, right? That's because we as African Americans have a cultural life of our own. And we got cultural traditions that are not against the spirit and principle of this religion. And so we ain't gotta take off our cultural dress and put on the cultural dress of another people to practice this religion. And then we work too hard and struggle to uplift the banner of Islam in America for somebody to come and tell us that we ain't practicing Islam right. So I had that kind of spirit, and I see that same spirit in many of our young men and women that are very educated, and they know how to defend our position from an academic perspective and a Quranic perspective, utilizing the Quran and the Sunnah and your common sense to represent us and defend our position. And so I'm happy to see that.
Wonderful, wonderful. And another question, if I might ask, it has to do more so with just, I guess in general, for our viewers and our listeners now, are there any like institutions or leaders or individuals in place that have contributed greatly to, you know, how Philadelphia, how culturally rich and diverse African American Muslim community in Philadelphia has become and is still to this day? Are there any notable figures or notable names or institutions that I guess have played a part in that happening that you could share with our viewers?
I mean, when you say institutions, what do you mean, like the masjid itself, or particular places, or what?
I mean, and like just a combination of everything, masajid, and you know, if there were any schools or institutions in place.
Oh, yeah, well,
The festival itself, for example, it says establish itself as an institution.
yeah, we have the, I mean, I evolved from the early nation, right?
Yeah.
So, really, the mother masjid in this town is the Grand Muhammad School.
Mm.
The Grand Muhammad School is the masjid, Sister Khaled Muhammad School, where members of the early Nation of Islam, we had evolved, and then our biggest accomplishment was the purchasing of that school, right? All the various masjids that you see, the majority of them in the African American community today, they sprung out of there. Right? I mean, I lived to see it. So a whole bunch of young people don't know that about that. Right? But the different imams that opened up masjids, Imam Sujuddin, Imam Muhammad Abdul Alim, I mean, majority of them all, they all came out of that school. Even the Salafi masjids. But they don't tell them guys, but when they be around me, and then I know them, I say, man, you ain't tell that guy you was in the Nation of Islam. He said, no, I ain't never told him. I said, man, this guy been jobbing you all the time. He came out of Nation of Islam. Right? So I'm telling you what Nation of Islam did for this city. Right? So in terms of institutions, that's how all these masjids got their growth. Then you have a lot of different, the school was really a flourishing, pretty strong school one time. My sons went to the school. My brothers graduated from the school. So the school was a major institution. Khaled Muhammad School was a national Islamic education. They were pioneers the Islamic schools. There were over 50 Khaled Muhammad schools across the country. So people that's talking about establishing Islamic schools and being organized to do that, our community pioneered that. That's why we had this museum. Because I grew up in a community where people that look like me was the voice for this community. I look around now, I'll be like, where the African American faces at? Every time I look at the news, people talking about Islam in America, all I see is immigrant communities supposedly representing the Muslim community. People say the Muslim community, African American community is now only 30%. I don't know who the person's doing these calculations are, but they ain't calculating here in Philadelphia. Because in Philadelphia, the majority of Muslims in this town are African American. And I've done studies with the school district of Philadelphia. When I was working with the school district of Philadelphia back in 1990? Yeah, 1990. And then the idea about how many students were Muslim students that were in the schools. Mm-hmm. And so we did surveys and we did assessments of where students being able to go home, be excused for the holidays, and be permitted for Jummah, to make Jummah Salat and all that. And so we work at the school and develop guidelines for accommodating the needs of Muslim students, right? Matter of fact, we work with Muhammad Nimmer from the CAIR organization back in '92 doing that, right? But y'all was just kind of like getting started around that time, right?
Yeah, 93, 94, a bit later on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful.
So in terms of, so I got off with this thing about institution. So we were working with the school district and we helped develop these guidelines for accommodating Muslim students, right, in the public schools. Institution, we work with that institution. Actually, our Islamic festival alone by itself have become an institution, right? But I didn't ever think of it myself as no institution. But one day I went to talking with a professor at Drexel University, I don't know, years and years ago. And then he was like, well, how long you been doing your festival? So I said, well, this will be our 15th year or something like that. He said, well, you got an institution. I said, I ain't think of it like an institution. If you say so, right? So now we've been doing that festival for like, I think this year would be our 28th year, right? So we built and so God willing, we have this festival that's an institution. Then our other passion is this New Africa Center, Muslim American Museum and Archive, right? And we're looking to expand our center to build a 5-story multi-purpose facility and to create a really big museum space and over 40 apartment units and 3 storefronts, right? So I am really excited about that.
Let's show the expansion plans when we walk and ask people. Also, you should tell us how everyone can support the museum and the project. One of our young academic colleagues here, Irtiza Farid, she was asking what was the process of putting this museum together? What were some of the challenges? I know, would this be a good time maybe to start doing the walk-in tour? And maybe you can address some of these in that process. Also, Jacob has a question around how did Imam Walidatul Muhammad's cross-faith, interfaith dialogue efforts were received when he was doing that. Maybe when we talk about Imam Muhammad and several of his pictures, you can address that question. So Sanai, should we set up the tripod? So stay with us. What we are going to do is we are gonna, I think we can, the video is off. So we are going to start setting up to show you the space that the New Africa Center is and the different pictures and all. Maybe you can walk us through the different segments that you have put together. I'm sure we won't have time to talk about every single image and picture here, but maybe at least some of them. You will see, pictures from the 50s, from the 60s here, from the Clara Muhammad School and many other places. So it's definitely a must-visit institution. So maybe we can start, inshallah. You can.
Okay.
Maybe Sanai as our wonderful.
Well, we call ourselves. We try to break these down into like five galleries, right? So what I can do, I'll just go real quick over like what each gallery kind of represent and then move on, right? This here gallery, we call this gallery Through Muslim Eyes Discover Islam. And it's predominantly poster exhibits that we were able to purchase from this group that designed these posters called Discover Islam years ago. And the posters are very colorful and they give people an overview and understanding about Islam and Islam's basic pillars and basic tenets and stuff like that. So what we do, we put up the tenets or the posters that highlight our basic pillars of our faith. And what I do when we have guests, visitors from other faith traditions coming to the center, I make them aware that we have all common faith traditions. We have in common the belief in one God, and that common belief in one God and fasting and charity and the other principles of our faith are common with all faith traditions. And so we try to make people feel comfortable and realize that we don't see other faith traditions as competition and enemy. We see other faith traditions as our distant relatives, right? So generally it goes pretty good. One thing I primarily highlight to people is that we all believe in the oneness of God, and that for Muslims we call the Creator Allah, and that Allah is Arabic for the God, and that we're not talking about a different God than the God that they believe in. And then I make them aware that Allah is an Arabic word, and that Jesus and Moses and the other messengers and prophets of God, they didn't come from Europe or come from England, so they didn't speak English, right? They spoke the Aramaic tongue, right? And so God is the English and Arabic is Allah. But we're all saying the same thing as the creator of the heavens and the earth. That's the one thing I make a key point, because a lot of people don't fully really understand that. They think you're talking about another God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but here's my favorite gallery here. This next gallery is our African Muslims enslaved in America gallery. Now, in this gallery here, we highlight African scholars that was enslaved here in America. And the reason why this gallery is so important to us, African Americans have been told that before we were brought here to America, we were jungle people living a savage life, and we should be grateful to God for allowing our slave masters for bringing us out of that savage land of Africa and coming here to America to serve them and to learn civilization. I mean, that was the mindset and mentality of people back then. And so,
yeah, so visitors will be able to read, for example, individuals like Omar ibn Said or Muhammad Ali ibn Said's short bios, look at images, some books, and some other documentation around that process, which is wonderfully rich.
yeah, well, the scholars that we have up here, we have several books that's been written about a variety of them. Our African Muslims in Antebellum, America, by Alan Austin. This is one of the first books that were written that gave narratives and overviews of these great men.
Yeah, for those who might be curious about reading suggestions, there's a nice, collection of books here by scholars like Suleiman Yang, may Allah be well pleased with him, Ali Mazrui, likewise, many others, Dr. Jackson, and many others that you can find here.
Oh yeah. Well, there's several books that have been written that highlight that's done a lot of scholarship and research on African enslaved here in America, right? This is one of the books written by the life of Omar ibn Said, right? But I'll tell you the one that I personally thought was about the most thorough of all the books on African Muslims enslaved in America was the Servants of Allah. Right. This sister here goes into real detail on many of the people, and then she even traced the history of many people that we may not been familiar with having any Islamic lineage, right? But for instance, like out of all these people we have here on this wall, I also do have Harriet Tubman. And we all know Harriet Tubman played a key role in her work as a Underground Railroad conductor. And she freed hundreds of African Americans and brought them from the antebellum slavery in the South and brought them up to freedom in the North. Harriet Tubman was a great woman and a strong woman of faith. But then so I put her up here primarily because I like what she had said at first. She said, I have freed many slaves and could have freed thousands more if only they knew they were slaves. So think about that. Harriet Tubman is saying she could have freed a whole lot more of our people, but they didn't even realize they were even enslaved. Right? That gives you a small indication of the psychological damage. The psychological damage that slavery have had on our people. They don't even realize that they're enslaved.
So,
that was the main reason why I put this great woman on this wall, because of her work with this freeing our people. But then this comment was so powerful because it reinforced the idea that our people have been stripped thoroughly of the knowledge of self, and that our people suffered traumatically from slavery, and that we were what the early Nation of Islam used to say, blind, deaf, and dumb to the knowledge of self. right? So this slavery was actually the manufacturing of the Negro.
Mhm.
Negro didn't exist before that. This slavery here in America manufactured and produced the Negro. Harriet Tubman said she could have freed so many more people had they known they were slaves. So that gives us an indication that our people, the psychological damage that slavery had on our people.
Mhm.
And this whole idea that, oh, well, slavery was practiced in all societies from the beginning of time.
Mhm.
Yes, slavery has been practiced in all the different societies in various forms. But there's never been a slavery that's been practiced like it has here in America, where slavery was race-based, and then the slavery being race-based took your humanity from you,
Mhm.
and that you had no rights. You weren't even considered human. And so just that thought for African Americans to have lived under a system for 200-300 years of cruelty like that.
Indeed.
And people wonder why these people seem to be so strange, right?
Yeah.
It's God's mercy these people are even still alive,
Indeed.
right?
Indeed, yeah.
Um,
And here I see we have another set of books, some of them from the nation itself. Right, so some of the books by Honorable Elijah Muhammad and others. And this is also, I think a connection to some of this history. The visitors will be able to see these and examine, inshallah. I know we are slowly getting to the end of our program, so let's continue our tour, inshallah, Ustad. And before we close, however, I would also love if you could, show us, why the dress. There's the fruits of Islam, soldiering in the entrance, and all of that too. So I know we have a lot to cover.
oh yeah, well, I know I get carried away. See, I'm a passionate person, I am.
That's why
We
everyone should
appreciate it.
visit here in person, inshallah.
Yeah, well, see, the underlying reason why I place such emphasis on this idea of our people not being aware that they were even slaves, because they're trying to give an idea of the mental state of our people, right? So now that we're clear that this new product called the Negro was produced, then I like to show how from the Reconstruction period up to today, how Islam has played this significant role in our development, and how Islam has got to be one of the largest faith traditions in America, and a large faith tradition that's highly respected and honored in the African American community, right? All right, so we are clear on the slavery and the psychological damage it had on our people.
Yeah.
Okay. So then one of the first individuals that played a key role to the African American community was Edward Blyden. Edward Blyden was a scholar from the West Indies, Arabic and Islam. He went to Africa. He lived in Africa. He was a politician. He was an ambassador. He was an educator. And he did research in comparing the life of the Christians and Muslims. So he wrote this book called Islam, Christianity, and the African Race, right? Blyden says in his book that Islam is more compatible for African and African people than Christianity.
Mm.
And the reason why he says that, he says because Islam permits the Africans to maintain their cultural life and their cultural traditions. Whereas Christianity did not really permit that.
Right.
They wanted you to adopt Western culture and Western dress and Western civilization to be a good Christian. So that's why Blyden said that Islam was more compatible for our people because they did not demand that we give up our cultural life. Edward Blyden. Then we had Noble Ali. Noble Ali, he founded the Moorish Science Temple. And the Moorish Science Temple of Islam was one of the early temples, because they were called temples, introducing people to Islamic ideas, that calling themselves Moors and Muslims. The one thing that Noble Ali worked hard to do was to reconnect our people to our ancestral past, reconnecting us with Africa, reconnecting us with the Moors from Morocco, right? Morocco was the land in which the Moors left Africa, went into Spain and conquered Spain and ruled Spain for over 800 years, 1,000 years influence in Spain, right? And brought about the Renaissance in Europe and rekindling education and all that. It was African people that went into Spain, being inspired by the Quran, and brought about education and relit the torch of education in Europe and generated and sparked the Renaissance, right? So that was important for Noble Ali to introduce that to Black people in America. And so they start calling themselves Moors and one calling themselves Negroes and identifying with this great, glorious history of Islamic Spain. That was a way to reconnect us with our past, right? Ancestors. Then we had Marcus Garvey.
Brother Mohammed, I know this is very important subject, but let's tell people that they need to come and because we have so much ground to cover.
No, I'm just showing the people which pillars played
Indeed.
the role.
Indeed.
All right, I'm a critic. This here Marcus Garvey with his Back to Africa movement, and his movement played a key role. He had a major impact on the Black community. He had more followers as a members of his organization than people had as part of the civil rights movement. That's how powerful he was.
Wow.
Right? The idea back to Africa and economic development, right? So now when we talk about the Nation of Islam and all its work, Nation of Islam's founder, Farad Muhammad, he basically took all these ideas that he's seen taking place with the Back to Africa movement and economic development with Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali and his message, right? And the education that was going on with Booker T. Washington and others, right? They formed the Nation of Islam. Mm-hmm. The Nation of Islam was formed, and then Elijah Muhammad led that Nation of Islam till 1975. And he had the big impact on the African-American community that he had. And his greatest giants were Muhammad Ali, Imam Worthy Muhammad, Minister Louis Farrakhan, and Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. Those were Elijah Muhammad's students. And that's the one thing I really tend to sometimes really get disappointed in when I talk with people. Mm-hmm. People want to talk about everybody else but Elijah Muhammad. Mm-hmm. Elijah Muhammad was the man that raised them all up. Mm-hmm. He was their teacher. Mm-hmm. So
visitors here can see different pictures of Elijah Muhammad, his parents, a sort of collage of some of these giant names that you mentioned, with Imam Worthy Muhammad up top there, Malcolm X, Minister Farrakhan, Muhammad Ali, and of course all the other images, such as how the Muhammad Speaks newspaper is featured. These are all wonderfully rich collections.
Indeed. I mean, the Muhammad Speaks newspaper was one of the largest African-American publication in the country. We were like selling, I don't know, just about 1 million copies a week. We were selling, like, I think they said close to 90,000 copies right here in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm.
To the sister's question, maybe that's an answer, the number of newspapers that were sold.
Yeah, I mean, you would see a lot of times you may not realize that the paper has half the type of impact that it has, mm-hmm. but it has a big impact. Mm-hmm. And then,
we have a wall here.
Is a good thing.
Yeah, we have a wall here of some of the leading politicians from across the nation, as well as from Philadelphia, who are Muslim, who are engaged in civic life, from Council Member Curtis Jones to State Senator Sheriff Street, to some of the national names like Keith Ellison, Ilhan Omar, Congressman Andre Carson, and many others, including one of the former Philadelphia police commissioners, Commissioner Sylvester Johnson, Army chaplains.
Yeah, we created that gallery. We call it the Art of Safety and Security. And the goal was to use this gallery to show that Muslims have been in the forefront of protecting and securing our country, and that we are not no bunch of terrorists, and we're not a threat. And so all these men and women are political and community servants. And it's an honor to have them hanging on this wall, and their work itself speaks for itself, that we're not something to be threatened or feel threatened by. Then the next wall here highlights primarily the Philadelphia story. All right.
Yes. So I believe this is then your father, Allah yarhamu.
Yeah, right here. This is my dad, a mural of him. And with me standing next to him, he's right down the street at 4255 Lancaster Avenue. That's where that mural is.
MashaAllah, may Allah be well pleased with him and accept all
Yeah,
of
he
his
was a
service.
highly respected person around this way. They referred to him as the mayor of Lancaster Avenue.
Yes, sir.
Because he found that he was a real strong social activist and businessman and all that. And so I've taken on that title. I've inherited that title.
Mhm.
I'm the mayor of Lancaster Avenue. Ask Councilwoman Jenny Blackwell, she'll tell you.
Yes, sir. Let's look at Secular Muhammad School. There are pictures of Secular Muhammad School and some of the pictures from the 73. This is, Philadelphia Temple number 12. You can see some of the names listed. People who are familiar with the city's history will be able to potentially see some of this. The Jewels of Islam mural here is very important. Again, in 75, the vanguards of Muhammad's Temple of Islam, of the sisters, and what's currently Philadelphia Masjid, the school building, some of the institutions like the fish business, and I guess the food and all of that. The bakeries the pictures are copied over here. As when you come in right by the door, you'll be able to see this. I think, is this a picture of the Cuba community?
That's the Cuba Institute.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the Cuba Institute.
Which is right around the corner, more or less, another historic institution that we will hope to, inshallah, host in this series. As some of you may have seen, upcoming programs will include an interview with Imam Kenneth Nuruddin from the Philadelphia Masjid, with Amir Qasim Rashad from United Muslim Masjid.
Here's one interesting picture that I think you and people would like to be aware of. This here picture is with Malcolm and Cecil B. Moore. See, Cecil B. Moore was the president of the NAACP in the 60s. And him and Malcolm had a great relationship. Matter of fact, it was Cecil B. Moore that brought down the walls of Jim Crow of the Girard College over there in North Philly.
I see. Wow, that's amazing history. See, I mean, for those of us who just look at the picture, it may not be, but this is why you should take the tour with whether to start here. I think we can see here probably people are either buying bean pies and all. There's a lot more to unpack in this history and this story. A little bit about the clothes, and a little bit more about how did you put together all the images? What was the research that went into that? And with that, inshallah, we will start closing our program. And we will ask you to also highlight, Ustad, please, how could people support your expansion project, which is listed very nicely over there, the current institution, what are ways to give support to your critical work?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, in terms of my associate, Brother Michael Muhammad, he's a member of the Nation of Islam. He follows Minister Louis Farrakhan. He evolved out of the early Nation of Islam, and he is a super artist and a great friend of mine. And he's the curator of all this, right? I've shared with him what it is that we were looking to do and the type of images that we needed or we had hoped we could have. And we just worked collectively together and put this whole thing together. So Michael Muhammad is the man that's do all this great work for this gallery. I know one thing I would like to talk about for 1 minute that's one of my favorite topics.
Yes, sir.
And that's that blackboard.
Oh yeah, that's quite important.
People want to know one of the reasons why the Nation of Islam was so influential.
Should we get a bit closer so our audience
Right.
can see it better?
See, the early Nation of Islam, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad knew the importance of symbols and signs. Every Muhammad temple of Islam in America had a blackboard like this. And that's what the ministers taught from, their blackboard. And then you gotta remember in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Black people are in a struggle for liberation and freedom from oppression. And so the Nation of Islam was a social, economic, religious protest movement, right? And it placed great emphasis on the need for freedom, justice, and equality. So the Nation of Islam's ideas and the ministers would teach, they say, look, here in America, under Christianity, all the Black man ever got was slavery, suffering, and death. And then you see a Black man hanging from a tree. That was a common occurrence in Jim Crow South and the North. So Black people were sick of being lynched. And then the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the message of the Nation of Islam said, come to your own and join Islam and get freedom, justice, and equality. So we've seen Islam as a message of unifying our people. We've seen Islam as a message of giving us hope and freedom, justice, and equality. And that's what our people wanted. So when you have firebrand ministers like Malcolm X and Minister Jeremiah Shabazz, and you got a 17-year-old or 20-year-old sitting in the temple meeting, and then at the end of the meeting, you ask them, do they want freedom, justice, and equality? And do they want to get their people free? And you be like, yes, I do, sir. And that's how we got to recruit people to join the Nation of Islam. And that message is still relevant today, because I'm looking at this Black Lives Matter movement, and I see that our language have been taken up and it's just graduated some. We call the white man the devil. Now they talk about the evil of white supremacy and systemic racism, right? And then they talk about the need for freedom, justice, and equality. And I'm like, woo, they done picked up our language to the next generation and took that language to a different level. So that's a great thing.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's such a, I think, insightful point to maybe start closing up. I mean, we are deeply thankful to you for all that you have done and for spending your afternoon with us, with our audience. We apologize to any questions that went unanswered, but there will be more opportunities for this. And we at CAIR-Philadelphia will continue to work with, be in the service of, and learn from ICPIC and from Brother Abdurrahim Muhammad. Allah bless you. As we close, maybe a few words on what is the process to visit the New Africa Center and how can people support you?
Oh yeah, well, we'll be right now because of this pandemic. We haven't been opening on a regular basis because of the restrictions, and we're pretty small. But we ask people to give us a call, and then we will certainly work to accommodate them. And then because of the pandemic, our primary service for the past year have been feeding the community. So we've been coming down to the center, feeding the community 2 or 3 times a week, where we give out canned foods and other items, and then on Saturday, hot meals. So God willing, this pandemic will hopefully be ending sometime soon, and then we can resume to regular hours. But people can send us an email, call, and we'll be happy to accommodate them. And then we are always looking for volunteers, people that are interested in helping us in our community service work with serving the community. Anyone interested in working with us in our community development projects. And we are always looking for donations because we need funding to develop our community development projects.
Wonderful. Let's repeat the website. I believe it's icpic.co, the new website. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. You can, the simplest one, you can go to our ICPIC.co website, or you could just go to the New Africa Center website, because they both interconnected, right?
Yes. Google New Africa Center, you'll find yourself in a very nice website, which will have information on the phone numbers and email, and you'll be able to also donate on the website as well.
Yes.
Wonderful. Sanai, thank you so much, both being on camera and behind the camera with us. Ustad, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always, an honor to spend time with you and to learn from you for the space and for all the work that went to this, to you and everyone involved with the project in different capacity. We are grateful. And inshallah, please continue to stay tuned for more of similar programs that we'll both, inshallah, curate together with Ustad Abdurrahim Muhammad and also with others. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Right. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank
So
you.
much.
All right.
Thank you, sir. All right. So we
Well,
will
thank you.
and see here.
Can you hear me?
So Jacob?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, sir, for all the idea and everything. So we will stop the live stream here.
Jacob, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So